Welcome back to the Show My Scars podcast. I'm your host, Derek Duker. Today I share with you a conversation I had recently with Robert Powell, who is the president of Kwik Performance, a family-run business out of Fairgrove, Missouri. They make serpentine systems and brackets that relocate air conditioning components in vehicles to tidy up engine bays for hot rodders. I met Robert a couple years ago when he hired me to shoot various types of YouTube videos for his business, including videos on how to install the components they sell. However, as we continued working with one another, we quickly became friends. We started having much deeper conversations than most people I work with, and I immediately started thinking about having him on the show. Today, it's finally happening. Here's a chat I had recently with Robert Powell of Kwik Performance. When we first started working together, shooting the videos out here, I remember the first phone call, we were kind of going back and forth, feeling each other out, trying to determine if it was the right fit. But ever since we've been here, it's super fun to come and shoot here. I feel like everybody that works here is like, I make sure I talk to them all on the way out. Culture seems to be a huge thing here at Kwik Performance. I know we talked a little bit about this personally, and it's just kind of like how you want things to go, but How do you build something like that? How did it start off, like finding the right people and setting up we want to have fun here, but we want to make money too?
Yeah. We're very fortunate that we've come across good people and things like that, because we live in a place where there's an opportunity to find other gearheads that are interested in things. But as far as we're such a small company that if you don't fit, then there's no reason for you to really be here or whatever, because we're a small family company that there's 5 of us basically. And so if you're going to be causing problems or something like that, but we've never had that issue whatsoever. The company was founded by 3 guys who were friends anyway, and they kind of divided up the labor. And then I came on as Wayne's son, as the production manager later after the company got going. And so it was really the 4 of us and then Ken's wife. So, I mean, it's always been this tight-knit group. And then the first person we really added on as things were changing, they wanted to promote me to a leadership position. And so I couldn't really do that and the production job at the same time, at least not well. We had to go find somebody, and it just so happened. And, I rely a lot on my faith. And I hope that comes through when we talk to each other sometimes. But it was one of those things I had my eye out in the next year or something. I wanted to find somebody to take this production position or whatever. And there just happened to be somebody who was our O'Reilly driver who would deliver parts to us. He ended up being a customer, and it was just one of those, like, I had this sense that he was put into my orbit for a reason. And so we approached him. I didn't know if we could get him or not. And he decided to come on board. And then it's one of those, like, I'm not the world's best boss. I didn't train to be a boss or anything like that, but I'm not trying to be people's friends either. So it's one of those, I really take the responsibility of taking care of people very, it's kind of sacred to me almost. Like, if you've been put in my care, then that's a sacred duty for me to try to make your job as good as possible, pay you as well as I can. And one of the things that I've been told about myself that I don't think about myself perhaps is when you pour yourself into people like that, they respond to you in a different way, where it's not like this Donald Trump loyalty sort of thing. It's much more like they already see that I'm willing to fight to the mat for them. And I also I treat them like they're family. I treat them like they're another human being that has value. I'm not above them. They're not below me, but we have a job to do. And so we talk about one of the things that David didn't understand, coming from, he was 20 years military and things like that. And, so he had a completely different world experience than I ever had. And I really appreciate what he's added, some of the order that he's added and everything like that. But so he's added some of that culture himself of a work ethic and things like that, where I never had to worry about him goofing off or anything like that. So he made it easy on me. But one of the things that I tried to do bringing him in is, we don't play the blame game around here. Like, if somebody messes up, he'd come to me, he's like, I've done this. I think this is basically a fireable offense. What do you want to do? Being real humble. And I was just like, David, I don't care whose fault this is whatsoever. What are we going to do to fix it? Let's focus on fixing the problem. And so having that sort of culture from the top of like, we're not trying to blame anything on anyone. We're just trying to be better than we were yesterday. And when mistakes happen, because we are human, that happens. We try to do the next step of, okay, well, how do we fix it? And then once it's fixed, let's take a look at it, not to, once again, retrospectively put blame on it, but how do we make sure that that's something like that doesn't happen again? And so I think that's a really long way of answering how do you build culture. But I think part of it, I was a philosophy theology major. So, I mean, this is sort of like, those are beginning principles for me as far as like, okay, I'm in a leadership position. What kind of leader do I want to be? Well, I'm not the most experienced. I don't have the most knowledge. And so part of it is I have to be really humble myself and hire people who can do the things that I can't, and then also be humble enough when they make a recommendation to put a lot of weight into that.
How do you develop those leadership capabilities? Because for some people, it seems like, I don't know, when you come across them, like when I first came across you, I see that in you, but then it makes me wonder, like, where does that come from? Because I don't truly believe that people are born with that. It's something that you develop over time. Is there anything that comes to mind when you think about that?
I think you have to be passionate about it. I think you have to be intentional about it because some people have a natural charisma to lead. I have a little bit of that. I've been asked to be in leadership positions a lot, and I'm always really reluctant about it. One, because it's not important for me to be the leader, but it is also important at the same time. It's important for me for things to be done well. And so if I see us falling down somewhere or something like that, I will speak up. And because I was willing to do that, a lot of times people took that as, well, won't you just be in charge, sort of thing. And so I've had lots of leadership roles over my life, nothing like crazy impressive, but that seems to be a factor. But I've also had some really great role models of people who were really impressive leaders. And I've always paid attention when I looked to a lot of leaders and I listened to them, what they had to say, and internalized it when I could, or if it was applicable at all. And so I guess I've been passionate about good leadership. I don't know if that's because it's something that I wanted in myself or saw lacking in the world, but man, a great leader is so awesome to be around. I mean, it's energizing. And I don't know, I guess I want to be one of those people, but it can be exhausting sometimes too, because if the people around you aren't stepping up to that same sort of, as Jocko Willink would say, extreme ownership, then, it can be pretty draining. But everyone around here takes so much ownership of their own job and they're really autonomous. And so that's part of the culture as well, is I don't have to micromanage anyone. Sometimes we'll take a look at a process if something's not getting done right. But I basically say, I'm going to show you the way that we've done it before. Please find a better way to do it. I want innovation, sort of thing. And when people feel like they have ownership over what they're doing, their buy-in becomes a whole lot better. And that's one of those, like, you can lead from front, behind, or example, or there's lots of different situations, and different people need different things too. And so one of my superpowers, if you will, is typically caring enough to get to know somebody, to know that, oh, they respond, David responds horribly to being talked to softly and everything like that. He's been in the military. He wants a masculine man of action. Let's tell me what needs to be done and stop dancing around. And then there's, Joel, who he would not prefer to be yelled at or criticized or something like that. But at the same time, he's a full-grown man that, can own his own mistakes. But he would much rather talk about it in an intellectual sort of way. And so you just tailor your strategy to whoever you're talking to. And that's not disingenuous. That's being more intentional with who you're actually talking to, instead of like, I'm this personality and you have to adapt to me. It's much more like, I'm just trying to help us get there. What's the most effective way? Do we need to run the ball, pass the ball? How do you want to play?
Adapting to their communication strategy, or their
it's very
their
important.
Form of communication.
Love language.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, one of the things that struck me right off the bat was how, and I said this before, but how fun it is to come in here, and your mom Nora has always got goodies in one of the rooms, and But it was like, as soon as I came in here, it was, you guys were offering me the stuff she was bringing in here. I think she got me something for my birthday, maybe. I do remember her asking me about that, inviting me to the Christmas parties. It was right away, it felt like I was just folded in.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Because I've worked at places where it was just like, I come in there and I'm waiting for 5 to leave and I don't want to think about that place. Didn't make friends there or anything like that. And then I've had the exact opposite. And other than when I see them, I'm just like, that's who they are. That's the type of person they are. Maybe we don't mesh. But sometimes I'm like, that's something that it feels like they've worked at. Is that true here?
I think it's a lot of me. That's how I want the work environment to be. Part of it is I have both extrovert qualities and introvert qualities. And so I like interacting with the people. And I think that's also, it's like you have to take the time to just be with each other. I'm very fortunate to have a mom that wants to do things like make cinnamon rolls on a random Tuesday or whatever. And she's doing a great job of fattening all of us up. I have no idea, why she's doing that, but we're blessed by it. But the fun atmosphere, it's like, this was supposed to be a lifestyle choice. And that's why I chose to make this my career, because I had other options. I even had a different company that I was building when I got asked to come on board. And part of it is, if this isn't fun, we have to do work. We can't just goof off and, drink beer all day or whatever. But if this isn't fun, we need to find something different to do, because life is short, life is hard, and you don't want a job that tears you apart and then you have to try to go home and be a decent human being and forget about what happened. You want something where it's like, I enjoy going to work. I enjoy the people that I work with. I enjoy the customers that we have and the projects that they're working on. It can be hard and frustrating because it's a family small business and I have to do 5 different jobs rather than being able to hire 5 people to do those jobs well. I have to do them sort of the best I can, which is also fun and challenging for me. But part of that is I need to get out of the office every now and then and just go talk to somebody and be a human being and reset. And so a lot of that, I think, is, I don't know if I have ADD or whatever it is, but sometimes it's like I need to go do something else for a second. My attention span just is not long enough, or I've been sitting at the computer for 2 hours. I just need to stand up and walk around. It's been a very difficult transition. Leadership behind a desk has not been good for my health comparative to when I was doing production. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think a little bit. One thing I want to talk about is the love that you have for your dad. And, he was part of the trio of the founders of Kwik Performance. I did not know you were adopted by Wayne.
Yeah, so my mom is my biological mom. And when I was around, this was about like 93, 94, something like that. My mom and dad got together, and it was in, was it like, I think it was right around when I was graduating, like 2003 or something like that, is when we like did the official adoption papers and everything like that. And that had to do with emancipation and all sorts of legalities that I don't really care about or whatever. But, one of the things that's powerful about adoption is somebody actually chose you. It wasn't just the accident of birth or whatever. And so he made a conscious choice, even though we were stepson, stepfather. He never was presumptuous about like calling me son or, like, oh, yep, now I'm married to your mother and this is the way that it is and you're a part of my household. It was something where we kind of chose each other. And he really is a great man, in a lot of different ways. He's crazy intelligent. He's very kind. He can be very harsh as well, as any man can be or whatever. But it was one of those things too, like I chose for him to be my dad as well. Like we were just going to have this relationship with one another. And there was never any pressure for me to follow in his footsteps whatsoever. In fact, he wanted me to find his own path because he's like, I'm not even sure what my path is. He's like, I've done lots of different things, but it's like, don't necessarily want you to just fall on my path. And, when I graduated high school, Kwik Performance really wasn't even much of a thing yet. It was sort of a sideline hobby. It was really cool that they were doing that stuff. And I was interested in doing cars, but never to the same level that he has been. And so, I have this, over the last 10 years, I've had this unique opportunity to spend almost every weekday with him working. So that's different than most father and sons. And we also have personalities that go well together. And I've learned to be humble enough where we don't butt heads very often. We can have conversations and disagreements and just talk about it without it becoming an emotional sort of thing. And so he's one of the closest people in my whole life because of that. And it's been fantastic to have an opportunity to get to know one of your parents that well, because especially as you get older, and my kids are now going to be 5 and 8 in May, my time is mostly taken up with them. We come up to, Papa's house every now and then or something like that. But, life drags you away from those people, in the way that our society is organized anyway. In some of the older societies, people would all live together, like your grandparents would be on the same house. And there was definitely advantages to that sort of lifestyle. But it's been an absolute pleasure. And I've learned so much about leadership from him, not only his leadership, but also in talking to him about what he's seen in great leaders and bosses he's had or something like that. And so I go to him all the time with hey, this is a situation. How do you think I should respond to it? And that's just a resource that most people don't have.
Yeah, and I think it's super important that part that you said where, I'm not even sure if this is my path. That's something that I've been very conscious of with my own daughter. She seems to have a little bit of that creative spirit in it, and that gets me all excited, but I try not to push her in that direction because, as I've said on the podcast, I started off as a sports writer, and then I had, life happens, and then sometimes you change your mind. And so I've had to go down different paths myself, and it was hard to choose what my next thing was. One thing that people have said to me is that they were amazed at how intentional I was about picking my next thing. And I think if I was so hyper fixated on, no, I'm a sports writer, that's my path, that could have made things really bad for me, especially with the market that's around Springfield. There's not too many places for me to go. And so that ability to be flexible and not try to force, a purpose or whatever it is, I think is very important. You mentioned, I also did not know that you said a philosophy major. That's what you got your degree in?
I never received a degree. I didn't go to enough classes to make that happen. When I went to college for the second time, I was a little bit older in life. I studied the theology, philosophy was packed together. So it wasn't a Bible studies major, it was a philosophy, theology major, which the philosophy side of it, Christian philosophy is interesting to me. The other side is my brother did a lot of that. He's interested in those guys. It's okay. I'm not passionate about it. I don't remember them as well. The theology side, that's what I was going to be when I grew up. But one of the things and one of the reasons why I didn't actually finish my major, aside from the fact that I had the opportunity to come on here and it was an opportunity I wanted to take, was the fact that I'd have to move, the way that works. And if I was going to be a professor, which is what I wanted to be, I was going to have to go to seminary somewhere else. And then I was going to have to take a job where there's just not that many of those, and you'd have to take it anywhere. And where I was more important to me than chasing that dream. Going back to what you were talking about earlier about don't know if this is my path or not. One of the things that I'm realizing and trying to grow in is this idea of my identity is not what I do. So in your case, a sports writer or something like that, that's not who you are. It just happens to be an expression of who you are. And I think the truth of what we all are is trying to find our identity. And then once you have that, you can literally do anything and it's going to be unique, and beautiful for you or whatever. But there are some things that you can do for work that express your identity more. And for me, where I'm at now, that's not so much like the building of the cars side of things, but it's the relationships that I'm building and the lifestyle that it affords me. that's part of my identity as a Christian man who values family time over money. And so for me, it's more valuable that I'm able to get home at 4:30 or whatever when the kids get home, so I can actually spend some time with them, because that's actually more valuable than if I would have been paid that extra few hours of staying at work. And so that's just a value judgment, and that's part of my identity as a father, as a husband, of what I'm investing in. So the lifestyle part of this company is so important to me. And if that went away, I don't know how long I would continue to do it, because it's not just, I have a passion for what we do because it's interesting, and I've invested tons of myself, and there's lots of my dad in it. And, there's all this other stuff in it as well. But if it took away from me what my core identity is, then how does this help my life anymore? And I would start seeking to make a change, either in how we ran the company, or maybe it's time to step away and do something else.
This episode is brought to you by Two Oddballs Creative. People on the internet can be a little bit judgy when it comes to websites, which, to be fair, is a good thing sometimes, especially when there's exchanging of money. However, that means your website design needs to be on point. Web development is much more than just how a site looks. It's also how it performs. A website needs to be quick, user-friendly, and direct consumers to performing your desired action. That's why I trusted Two Oddballs with my website and my logo. To get a hold of the Oddballs, just go to twooddballs.com, or you can call them at 417-986-6332. Finding out what your core values are, and finding a career, or just simply a job, if that's the stop that you're at in life, that matches up with that, I feel like is super important. Because a couple of the places I've been at in which I've experienced the most burnout, and it was even the stop along my sports journalism journey where I won a bunch of awards, there were a couple of people in leadership, and I had a good time there, and loved a lot of the people I worked with. But there were a couple times where my values, I felt like, fell in the crosshairs. Don't report this, or you're not going to be able to go back to that school. And I had to luckily I had that leadership whenever I went directly against them and ran that story anyway. Didn't really punish me for it, but when you're in those situations, like the last marketing place, or not the last marketing place, but one of the marketing places I was at, they were being dishonest with some of the products and services they were selling. And I just remember going home and just like laying in bed, like staring at the ceiling, like, this is what I'm going to have to do my whole life, is like sit here and watch people be dishonest or whatever. And it makes it so hard to go to work. And obviously the way you guys have stuff set up here, that doesn't.
Well, you'd be surprised, because even as you were talking about that, I was thinking about the fact that one of the things that I had to, I don't know the word, determine, I guess, is do I actually believe in the product that we're selling? Because if I don't, then I can't be here. If I think our product is inferior or unfairly priced, any number of metrics, I wouldn't be able to live with myself, basically. And so one of the things that drives innovation around here as well is it's not that I don't want the bad publicity or something like that. I know that that's not good for a company or whatever, but it actually affects me when someone has a problem with our product. And I go straight to did I do something wrong, or did I not do something well enough to where they're having this problem? And so we always, even though we don't play the blame game, it's like, well, you're having a problem. Well, it's my product, so I'm going to start with me being responsible for that. And one of the things that we found over time is we have a great product. It can be a little bit difficult to install, especially if you don't follow the installation instructions. And so that's why we started this program as well, of constantly improving those installation instructions, but also creating videos so that it's easier, and making sure that there's troubleshooting documents and things that, just so they don't have that problem in the future. And so I'm at a place now where I really believe in our product, but I also know that, there's imperfections. We can do as much quality control, probably more than others, and still a quality control issue may pop up because it's like, oh, well, we were checking, but we weren't checking in this way, where that little variation, because there's a manufacturer involved who luckily is here local. So it's easy to just drive down the road and say, hey, how did this happen? This coal that you cut out, it's supposed to be this, but this happened. What happened with your machine, your CNC machine or something like that? Or we bring it in-house and it wasn't spec'd correctly or something like that. So believing in what you do, that's very powerful as well. It makes it very easy to continue doing what you're doing. And then all of a sudden, I keep saying I've been here 10 years, and that's not true anymore. I've been here 12. But time goes by so fast that I'm not keeping track. That does nothing for me in my head. I'm very forward looking. That's sometimes to my detriment, because I don't recognize some of the things in my life that I need to heal, because I'm just looking forward to what needs to get done. I'm very pragmatic about that sort of thing, or I just keep putting it off. Like exercise. I used to not have to exercise as much because my job was active. Mm-hmm. Like several jobs I had were just active. And so I was able to go home and drink beer and, eat normal food and not think too much about it. I was also a younger man with better metabolism. But sitting behind this desk, and all of a sudden it's like I'm stiff and I'm fat and I don't feel good. And now it requires extra. And it's just like, where do I get this extra from? Because it feels like from sun up to sundown, I'm doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a conversation. One of the other things I noticed about you really quick is that you were one of those people that understood those types of things, like the value of taking care of yourself and making sure you have got a good environment that you're cultivating here, and all those things. Like we started, I don't know when it happened, but at some point we started having like semi-deep conversations while we were,
That's the only type of conversation I've really been interested in.
Yeah. Yeah, where did that come from? Because when I first moved down here, I had just barely started to investigate mental health. I went to my primary care and talked to him about, I was like, man, I'm not feeling premium right now,
right?
Mentally. And I have had to learn so much about taking care of myself. We all knew, you're supposed to eat your veggies. You're supposed to work out a little bit and stretch and stuff, but it seems to like go a little bit more beyond that. It's like the thoughts that you're having, and if you have very unhelpful thoughts a lot, how to reframe your perspective. Where did you start picking up on some of that?
Yeah, so that all comes from the theological world for me. I often say that I see things more in the spiritual world than I do in the, a lot of times I'm like, I don't understand where you're coming from, because I'm coming from such a different angle than what, you see normally in the world. And so the idea of perfecting myself, and even an older thread of mine of like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, I want to be a Renaissance man. I want to be a man that could do literally everything, and do it at a high level, just like in the Renaissance, Michelangelo or something like that. I can't paint at all. My stick figures don't look very good. And that's okay, but that wasn't even necessarily what I was talking about. It's just this being able to be a capable individual. And so part of that is the well-rounded man has to be physically capable. He has to be witty, mentally astute, also has to be humble enough to recognize, like, here's where I'm not so good, and having the fortitude to follow through with so how are we going to improve that? And it's, you can't go around your whole life feeling sad for that you're not good enough. But at the same time, you shouldn't be like, well, that doesn't matter. Yeah, it does. Trust me, you'll be much happier if you start working on yourself. And so I've been unsatisfied with how I was created, or how I let myself fall from how I was created, if you will. And so I've been very intentional about seeking out what's the best wisdom of the ages. And so whether that's from first century or from last week's article that got released or something like that, luckily, some people like Joe Rogan have come along that have a lot of people on his podcast to talk about stuff like that. So it's easier to access that, because I'm not going to go look in a peer-reviewed article or something like that and read deep. I'm a slow reader, so that's sort of, but if we can have a conversation about it, and usually anyone who's an expert is interesting to talk to, as long as they're not, can you cuss on your podcast?
Yeah.
As long as they're not a jack. Because there's some of those people too who claim to be experts, and then they're not very charitable about what they don't know, or things outside of just because you're an expert over here doesn't make you an expert over here. So, there's lots of different facets to life, and some people specialize. Like there's bodybuilders who don't seek out the spiritual life at all. They're just worried about their physical physique for whatever reason. There's other people who, go sit on top of a pole or something like that for their spiritual and deprive themselves of all human contact. And I don't think that's what we're meant for either. We're meant for interaction with one another. And that's good. So there's so many facets to life, and it's important to engage with the important ones as much as you can. And so I'm open to it, and I want to be a saint when I grow up. So, it takes a lot in order to pull that off, and not that it's like this sinless, holier than thou sort of thing, but this sort of like, I want to be pretty doggone pure as far as in my intentions towards life and towards people. I don't want to be greedy. I don't want to be envious. I don't want to be all these wrathful, all these things that I see people expressing that, and it brings them no happiness, no joy, no peace. And I want happiness, joy, and peace in my life. Also recognize that the easiest path is not typically the best path. And, it's the easy path that leads to being fat and slothful and unhappy with yourself. But you can also, one of the things that my father-in-law actually told me is when I met my wife, I was working 7 days a week because I was poor, and it required more than one job in order to just make ends meet. And so I was pretty used to that. I grew up from, a poor family or whatever, and we always had everything we needed. It wasn't like that, but it was one of those, like, we weren't driving brand new cars. We didn't have a huge house. It was just that upper, lower class, lower middle class, but there was not a lot of extra money. And when I was first born, we were farmers, really poor. Funny story. I meet my wife, we're older in life, but I'm still going to ask her father for permission, sort of thing. He and I go fishing. We kind of both know what's getting ready to happen. The way things are said versus the way that they're heard. He hears me say, "I'm going to marry your daughter. I need you to be okay with that." What I asked is, "I really want to marry your daughter. Are you okay with that?" I didn't know until much later that that's what he thought I said, that I was basically informing him, sort of thing. I'm like, I was so embarrassed. I apologized to him. One of the things he said is, "Yeah, that'll be fine, but you can't raise a family and work 7 days a week. You're going to have to figure out how to do that." And so that was that was the big changing point from the switch of, basically I was working as much as I could in order to create as much wealth as possible, which wasn't much. I was cleaning toilets in banks and things like that. It's not the highest paying job in the universe, but it was good. It was good work, better than what I was doing before. But that metric shift of what's valuable. Is it the money? Well, I grew up poor, so I valued money quite a bit because it seemed like that was going to fix most of the problems we had seemed to be associated with money. They weren't. If you have a problem that money can fix, you don't have a problem. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that was sort of the genesis. Was I would give Dan Oswalt the credit on changing my mindset of what is valuable, and that has been one of the most powerful drivers in my life since then. Of, okay, I value my family the most. And I always did that. I was expressing that by working constantly. And I thought that was the best way to provide for my family. But the best way I can provide for my family is being around them and also teaching them some of these principles that I hold that hopefully will serve them better, and they won't have to start from nothing.
I think that's all we're meant to do. I've started to think about that myself. Like, I talked about earlier, not trying to push my daughter in a direction, but it's understanding that she's watching everything I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And, in talks with my therapist, I did not realize how much of my parents' baggage I was incorporating for myself,
Sure.
just completely unknown. So I've started to really pay attention to not just what I'm doing, but what does it say about me as a dad, or, essentially to her, like, she's looking up to me to figure out, okay, what am I supposed to be doing in life? But going back to, taking care of yourself, what are some of the things that you're doing? Because knowing what I know now as trying to start a business, my goodness, the amount of stress and the time, like, I'm having to like plan time to set aside and literally plan time, not even plan time, but like make sure that at some point I wind up doing a little bit of physical exercise or stretching and stuff. What are some of the things that you're doing to try to take care of yourself?
So one of the things that I recognized that was going to kill me was anxiety. I think we talked about this about the same time last year. One of the things that was missing in my spiritual life, I've done all this study, but I haven't spent a ton of time like in church. Like I go to church and things like that, but like that hasn't been like, I haven't been getting all this from sitting down on Sunday and listening to a sermon or whatever. It's something that I seek out outside of that. And there's this thing called Lent. I don't know what your listenership is like, but anyway, it's the 40 days before Easter. It sort of observes a time of fasting and almsgiving and prayer, and it's a time that usually like somebody gives up something, like, oh, I'll stop drinking during Lent or something like that. And then I was scrolling on TikTok, as I used to do quite often. Now I'm on YouTube Shorts because that's our platform and everything like that. And there was this nun, and nuns are great. They're interesting people when they're speaking. And she said Lent is a time for you to give up something lasting. Like it's something that you recognize something in your life that shouldn't be there, and you decide to give it up for 40 days. And it's this great jumpstart on changing your life sort of thing. It's this, I don't know what the science is nowadays on how long it takes to develop a new habit. Somewhere back in my past, I heard 37 days. I don't know if that's still accurate or not. Anyway, so I wanted to do something for Lent, and that sounded so much better than just giving up something temporarily, and said, I'm going to give up anxiety. And that was a wild thing. And it sounds laughable or whatever. It's like, how can you just decide to stop being anxious? It's like, well, for me, I have a religious mechanism for doing that. It's like every time I felt anxious, it would cause me to be convicted that I was doing something out in the Lent period outside of what I promised to do. And so I would pray about it and say, I'm going to stop being anxious about it. I'm still concerned about what's causing me to be anxious, but I'm not going to be anxious about it. I'm just going to trust and work. Trust and work. And it was really profound at the end of, Easter came and went. And then in the past year, I eerily don't feel anxious anymore. Sometimes it concerns me that I don't feel anxious. I'm like, I should be really anxious about what just happened. And I'm just not. I still get, like, if my kid gets really hurt, I don't know that falls under the category of anxiety, sort of thing. And I don't know clinical anxiety. I'm not of that world. So if I speak of things, it's coming from a different world. I don't mean to act like I'm an expert in the psychological world or whatever. This year, part of it was for Lent. What I decided to do was kind of a twofold thing of I wanted to start prioritizing sleep, because I don't get enough alone time. I mentioned earlier that I have this introverted and extroverted side. Well, I really would like to have days to myself where I can just recharge, reflect, have long thoughts. And in my life with my young children, my wife, and my business, I don't get those opportunities. And what it's come down to here is I get like an hour a day at the end of the day. And sometimes I'll stretch that out, like, hey, I'm enjoying myself, I'm having a drink, or, I'm watching a good movie, documentary, whatever. And I would sacrifice sleep. And all the studies show that poor sleep, not only like not having a regular sleep routine, but also just not getting enough hours, is the cause of most mental health or physical health problems. So it's like, we need to fix this. And so I just started going to bed at 9:30, which has been insanely hard to switch that habit. And daylight savings time happened during the same time. So I mean, I'm all whacked up. But here, three weeks into it, it's starting to be a pretty natural rhythm. And I just got off being sick, and my throat's still a little bit messed up or whatever. But it's amazing how much that has helped me. And then also trying to live out my faith in this way of seek the Lord first and his righteousness, and then all else will be given unto you. I don't really care about the all else will be given unto you part, but so it's like, well, how do I do that? And I'm not a morning person. I'm grumpy. I'm sore. I'm stiff. I'd prefer not to have to do mornings, like the early morning part. And so trying to do just 15 minutes of Bible study in the morning and not missing it. Like just being like, this is my life now. This is what I do. The first thing I do is acknowledge my Creator and not worry about what's going on in my day. It's not even like praying about my day, because there's some people that like visualize your day and everything like that. And that's lots of power in that. But I don't want it to be about me first. I want to seek him first. And so I've started with studying his time in 40 days in the desert, what he was doing, and it's led me down this great path that, as much as I know about it in totality, it's amazing how I find new connections all the time. And so I've been really enjoying that. And that just sort of first thing of being awe-inspired by creation, it puts everything back in perspective a little bit, to where the problems that are facing me become smaller and manageable. And I also don't feel alone. And, that's powerful in its own right. Aloneness can cause so many. And I mean, my problem is I never feel alone, even when I'm by myself. And then the exercise, there's an exercise element of 15 minutes before I go to bed. I stopped eating at 7 o'clock. That's the other part about good sleep health. So stop eating at 7, going to bed at 9:30, probably actually falling asleep at 10. And then I've been doing some really embarrassingly easy, but it's hard for me because of how far I've deteriorated, stretching. We talked about that, getting down that catcher's position sort of thing and getting the hips opened up. Also just doing some really form push-ups that are from my knees, and then stretching back and just doing all that, and then just doing a few exercises to limber up before I go to bed. It's sort of like I'm warming up to go sleep, because as you know, sometimes that pillow will give you a neck cramp if you're not properly stretched before you go to bed. Stretching becomes such an important part. I have not been able to stretch in the morning yet. I don't have that amount of courage in order to put myself through that much pain when I'm still trying to wake up. It's like, I need coffee.
Yeah. The way you talked about the anxiety part of not having it, you say you're not from that world or whatever, but I think you actually are tapping into something that I've been investigating myself. Everybody experiences anxiety. I think what you're catching is like that unchecked type of anxiety, because without anxiety, like, we wouldn't be here. Our ancestors
been eaten by a tiger.
Yeah. So I think what has happened over time is that, that part of us is still there. We're worried about a bunch of other stuff.
And stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, social media.
Yeah. But what I think you've found there is, so our anxiety is always trying to give us an action item. And what I picked up with what you said is like, you're trusting, others might call it intuition, you're trusting your Savior. And then what was that, the work part of it. Mm-hmm. So what an analogy that I've picked up that I really like is, somebody said that it's like your anxiety is your crewmates on a ship, and they're telling you iceberg ahead, or whatever, and your job is to listen to them without becoming completely overwhelmed, and then do something about it.
And no one's benefited from you freaking out about it.
Yeah, exactly. When I get most worked up, I become fixated on the problem, and it's almost like I'm staring at the iceberg heading straight for it. And I don't know, or I do know, like, I have two options, and then I inevitably get stuck trying to decide between them, like which one's the right one. And I think that where I'm falling off is I'm not trusting myself, or my God to tell me which one is the right one. Because a lot of it, especially with business, is sometimes there may not be only one right answer.
Right.
And I've had a therapist tell me this too. He's like, not everything in your life is an A or a B.
Right.
Like there's all these options and 90% of them are quote unquote the right one.
Right.
And you're becoming, I think part of that's my perfectionism.
Sure.
You know, growing up, I constantly thought, I came from being poor. So like right now where I'm at as a, trying to be a small business owner is I am so afraid that the decision that I'm going to make is going to be the last one I get to make because of the money aspect.
That doesn't go away.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask you. It sounds like we kind of grew up pretty similar. Yeah, how do you not let that overwhelm you?
Well,
and I guess you already answered that by trusting work. But.
Yeah, so part of it is just the method for moving forward. It's like, okay, what if this? I'm gonna lean on my dad here for a second. So a couple of things that he taught me was, if something isn't perfect or doesn't go right, so what? You're still alive. You still got air in your lungs. What's next? It's okay to fail. You shouldn't just go try to fail or something like that. But at the same time, don't be afraid if things don't go well, because he's like, in his experience, he's like, I've failed many times and then I found something else and it was fine. Still had food on the table, still the important things were still taken care of, and it's not the end of the world. It may be the end of a dream or something like that. But the other thing, and this is one of those, like, if I ever do a book or something like that of wisdom or whatever, first things first is, no matter what's going on, you cannot go about your life one emergency to the next. And there's always going to be emergencies. You need to be able to prioritize, triage, whatever the analogy you want to use. Remember what first things first is. So if something comes up, you sort of analyze it of, how important is this? Is this something that supersedes what I'm already doing? Or is there anything I can do about it? Because that's one of the terrible things about anxiety is worrying about the things you have no control over. You have to give that up. And that's hard, because the things that you have no control over are usually the ones that are the most powerful forces in your life. Like, what if people just stop buying our brackets? Well, I have almost no control. I can't force hardly anyone to do that. I could probably lean on a friend or something. I need you to buy one today. But just keeping first things first, and that's the work part. Don't let perfection be the obstacle to progress. Keep working forward. If there's an emergency that arises and it does supersede what you're doing, take care of it. If there's nothing you can do about it, you might as well forget about it or write it down in a book of, hey, just so you know, we might want to be aware of this in the future. There's nothing we can do about it, but just something to keep in mind. But so prioritize what's the most important thing you can be doing right now to work towards making things better. And don't get into the trap of comparison of, oh, this podcast is doing this, or this company is building this, or the jealousy trap of, oh, they just built a new fancy building, I want one too. Of, how can I be better than I was yesterday? How can this company be better than it was? How can our product be better than it was? And if you continue to focus on that day in, day out, it's amazing the strides that you can make over the course of a decade or even a few years. And so, I worry about money, here and there, because, the cash flow at the beginning of the month and the middle of the month and the end of the month are different. And having to where it was before, where it was just me, it wasn't stressful. But now, there's other families that are reliant upon me being able to write a check at the end of the month. And we've been very fortunate that we've never had any debt whatsoever. But that also means that the dumbest thing about the way that the financial system works is we've had 20 years in business. We've never had to take out a loan. And, we have this long history of sales. It has an inertia of its own. It's one of the nice things that I can rely on a little bit more, here later on. It's difficult for us to get a loan, like even a line of credit or something like that, without like, oh, we want you to put up the land and everything against it. And it's like, I don't want to do that though. Like, that's, That's owned by my dad. I don't want to put that against the company or whatever. And that's nothing to like against the banks. That's the way they do business or whatever. But, it's one of those, like, if a couple of the companies or bigger accounts decide not to pay us this month, it would get pretty tight on getting everyone paid and making sure that our suppliers are paid and everything like that, because we want to be a good partner with them. But it's one of those, you just got to have a little bit of faith and work towards making right, and don't do anything too stupid, like spending all of your money on a shiny thing. Make sure that you can, do your due diligence, count the cost before you start building. And once again, those are all just theological principles that I try to apply just to my normal mode of operations. But the not worrying thing, that's a talent that you have to develop.
Yeah, definitely. How did you wind up? I know you had a business before this, but you just told me that you started off as, wanting to be in theology.
I was going to be a theology professor.
But then you wind up becoming a business owner who has never had debt.
Right.
Where'd you learn all those skills along
the way?
So
it was really fortunate because when, Kwik Performance is Ken, Wayne, including Kenny. And when the three guys got together, they had day jobs already, and they were both, all three of them later in their careers sort of thing. So they were kind of established. And this was just something they were working on with their own projects, and they wanted to come up with a solution to a problem they had for a bracket, for an engine. And it just so happened that they put some money in the middle of the pot. I think it was $300 or $400, something like that, in order to get these made. But it was the same money to have two made as it was to have four made. And so they had two extra, and then they sold those, and they're like, oh, maybe this is a product. And so they put it on eBay sort of thing. And, for the first several years, that's all it was they had this one product and they were selling it on eBay. And it wasn't enough money for any of them to quit their jobs, and it wasn't enough money for any of them to retire. It was just one of those, they had a little bit of beer money or whatever. But then as time went on, they developed a couple other products, and all of a sudden it was like, even one of the guys is like, hey, this is turning into a job. He was doing the production work, and he's like, and, I have a real job, and I don't want to just work 18 hours a day. I'm not at that stage of life anymore. And so they actually bought Kenny out at that time because he was also moving and getting a promotion at his work and everything like that. And that's when I was asked to come on board. And at that time, it was a part-time job. I was cleaning banks in the evening. I was going to school during the day to Southwest Baptist in Bolivar. It was around that same time period that I was starting to recognize that the professor path was not going to pan out because of the reasons I said earlier, with the having to move and things like that. And it's like, I have an established business here. And I kind of thought that I would just grow the cleaning business. The hours stink because it's in the evenings and on the weekends and stuff, but you have all day. It's actually not a bad gig, but it was also incompatible with family life because of those hours and things. And so I had to hire somebody to go do it on my behalf. It grew in such a slow and controlled way. And then Wayne, he's 80 now. 20 years ago, he was 60, and he was looking at throttling back to halftime anyway at work. And so he kind of naturally retired into a job, and he didn't need it to make a bunch of money for him. So he just kind of did it continually as a hobby, but he did it professionally, and they set it up as a company and everything like that. So that's luck of the draw. That you can't plan that. I didn't even really know that it was something that I wanted. And as time went on, I was like, okay, guys, we're starting to get into, this was in my 30s. We're doing this. I'm giving you the best years of my life. I need to make sure that this thing isn't going to get sold out from underneath me, and all of a sudden I have to start over at 40 or something like that, because that's hard, and I don't know exactly what skill set I would have developed to be marketable, sort of thing. So maybe it's providence, maybe it's luck, but here I am.
More so, how did you learn the position that you're in now? Managing everything really in the money aspect. There's so much that I've had to teach myself.
Yeah.
I just sat down and was like, I'm going to do my business taxes today. Yeah. and I just kind of fumbled my way through it until one of the numbers that came out didn't seem like I'd be arrested for it.
Right.
So is that kind of how you picked up your...
There's some of that. I have, it was one of those, like, when I got the phone call that said, hey, Ken called me, who was the president at the time, and it was also a part-time gig. He was still a full-time engineer at his job. Called me and said, hey, Wayne and I had a meeting, and we've elected you the new president. I'm going to step down effective, a month or two in the future, something like, just so you know. And that was one of those, like, glad you told me, sort of thing. I knew it was something that was coming, but it was also surprising, the timing. I didn't know it was going to be that fast. Learning how to be a president has been weird, because the very first question I had is like, okay, what does a president do? Because it's not something I ever looked at. I was always a peon, I was just trying to figure out how to be middle management or something, how to control my department. Now I'm above a bunch of departments that I don't even understand what they necessarily do. Now, in a small family company, that's overstating it, but I don't know how to do. I'm good at math. I don't know how to do accounting. I don't know what all these different numbers and how they put them in. And so that was a lot of self-taught, a lot of also relying on some experts, like, hiring someone to do the taxes. Ours is just complicated enough that I'm not interested in messing that up and getting audited. But other things about marketing and all those things, part of it is just you get on YouTube and you start listening to people, you start finding people out in the world, and you start asking much more interesting questions than how are you today? And it's amazing the wealth of knowledge that some of them have. And you can also see the mistakes they're making sometimes, or just, that doesn't work, or that works really well. How are you pulling that off? Because one of the weird things, but it goes back to that initial principle, is how do you do this well without spending a bunch of money? Because you can go hire firms and experts all day long, and they'll promise you rates of return that don't exist. But it's like, well, this would be all dependent on such a radical amount of growth that we wouldn't be a small family company where I was going home at the end of the day. So that's been the real trick, is how do I pull this off in a professional manner that is honest and puts out quality? But being a president, the best advice I was ever told about being a president, it just essentially means that you unclog the toilet before you go home at the end of the day. There's nothing glamorous about being a president. You're doing all the jobs that either your other guys don't have time to do, or that it's, just so oddball that it's like it really needs somebody on this. And so I end up doing a bunch of stuff that does not seem like a good use of my salary and time, but somebody has to do it. And so that's the toilet analogy of it falls to me, and I'm the one that has to make sure that it gets done. And I don't know. I still haven't figured it out.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's part of it, is being okay with you don't know it all.
Yeah.
And you may be making mistakes along the way.
Yeah.
I think we've texted each other this a couple different times. Like, sometimes it feels like we're just being paid to learn. And honestly, it's learning to kind of take that as almost a gift. Back in the day, I could have, got wound up and been like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here like not actually producing anything that's going to make me money. I'm sitting here spending time, and as a small business owner, you're not getting paid.
Right.
A lot of the times. I think it's being okay with that and understanding the value in it.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go ahead and start wrapping this up here. Why don't you tell the folks, a little bit about Kwik Performance and what you all do here?
Yeah. So, like I said, we're a small family company, but we have this, because we're so professional and we do have this great culture and great people that work for us, we're able to put out something that's, kind of punches above our weight a little bit. But for people that are doing hot rods and things like that, the popular thing is to swap a more powerful, more modern engine into it. And a lot of times there's accessories that go along with those engines, like alternators, power steering pumps, AC compressors. And we make brackets to mount those on the front that are more friendly located to put them in those old vehicles. For the longest time, that was all that we did. Recently, we've kind of made this shift to where, we're kind of in the air conditioning business as well. A lot of these old vehicles didn't even come with air conditioning. And so, companies like Vintage Air, who's our biggest customer. We sell brackets to them, and they package them together with their AC system that they've retrofitted to put in these old vehicles. But we've also, started selling AC compressors and things of that nature. And so, if you're doing an old truck or something like that and you want to put AC in it, we're a good option for you to call and say, hey, I'm trying to achieve this. And we can have a conversation about just that sort of old school sort of, two guys talking. We're not really going to compete with, Summit Performance or something like that. Summit Racing, I should say. It's an enormous box store, and you call into a tech center, you may or may not talk to somebody who really knows what they're talking about. We have a completely different experience with us of this is like we don't do any installations ourselves or anything like that, but we build vehicles ourselves. So we do have this base of knowledge. And when you talk to somebody, you're going to talk to somebody who has an ethic that cares about taking care of you and treating you right. We try to keep our prices, in a price point that makes sense to where we can pay ourselves. Like we're not trying to compete with China or Amazon or something like that. And so we're just going this middle way. And most of the people here also really appreciate the ability to, Joel just got back from Okinawa. He was there for 2 weeks, and, allowing him the opportunity to go do that. A lot of companies that he wouldn't have been able to do that, but he got to go there. His brother lives there, and spend some time with him. And that's not a trip you get to make very often. It's very expensive as well. But anyway, Kwik Performance is, kind of a hot rod company. We're an air conditioning company where we make front serpentine brackets for Chevy engines. And it's all done by guys who aren't necessarily, they're complex individuals that have lives. And we're trying to show more of that to people through our YouTube channel and stuff like that. There's sometimes like I want us to stay professional, but I want to be personal. So yeah, I think that's generally who we are. And we're in Fairgrove, Missouri. Give us a call, look us up on the website or whatever. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. That was really cool. I appreciate this format. Yeah. I've never done a podcast before.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. I did want to say, that middle way that you seem to be going is, I may be biased, but it feels almost perfect because one of the stories I tell a bunch of people is whenever I think it was an email that you got, and it was the dude with that desert racing truck.
Yeah.
How many brackets? He sent back a handful of brackets, and then finally, was it David reached out to him and was like, okay, what are you doing with this? Mm-hmm. Because, we feel like we make these pretty sturdy. Why do they keep coming back broken? And he's using it in a way that wasn't intended.
He's jumping a 1-ton 4-door Ford truck on dunes, putting G's on. We never test for anything like that. It's like, oh, if you're going to use it that way, we're going to make a stiffer bracket for you. So, And once again, like if people just tell us, if they ever have an issue with our bracket or something like that, just tell us about it and we'll figure out how to make it better. We try to design it where it's good to go from the beginning, but we don't necessarily know how people are using these things all the time. Sometimes they're being used in airplanes, for God's sake.
Really?
Yeah, you had to figure out how to not drop oil pressure when you flip upside down, but there's a guy with an LS engine in an airplane. I think he's on YouTube. That's been years ago, but he called us up one time because he wanted air conditioning.
Holy smokes! But yeah, the whole way that this set up, quality product, excellent customer service, and then the video aspect of it. I remember that first phone call, and it kind of shocked me because I am so not used to. I've only been in marketing for. Gosh, actually, it's been about 7 years now, but only recently have I been, the one that's talking to the actual business owner. It used to be, I would come along if they needed questions about how I was going to do the content, but most folks do not understand the benefit to that, number one, in their marketing, but the way that you guys do it, the way, one thing about your dad is he's so willing to share knowledge and seems to enjoy doing it. The amount of education you guys give away on there, and then the extra customer service of the installation videos, that kind of shocked me that you guys had that idea all on your own. Because that most business owners don't think that way. They're not able to put themselves in the customer's shoes and think about what would benefit them. And
yeah, and I think that actually is a big focus for us as well. And we do have the added advantage of, at this company that we were talking about, which was Rayco Suspensions in Mount Vernon. My dad was the director of marketing. He had lots of different positions, but I mean, that was sort of the main. So I grew up in a marketing household. So thinking about things from a marketing standpoint and not selling snake oil, this idea, and it's even a Jeff Bezos idea of, what's the customer experience with this? That's going to give us a competitive advantage over the cheap China, Amazon sort of brackets or something like that. Or, even some of the larger companies that make great products or whatever, but God forbid you have to call their tech line sometimes because, you may not get somebody who knows what they're talking about and it'll be frustrating for you.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, man, for coming on here. Yeah. It's been a blast working with you, and
hopefully we get to continue doing that for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely, man.